Welcome to the Dakota Resource Council podcast, where we dig into challenges facing North Dakota and explore real solutions. I'm your host, Sean Erickson, the Communications Coordinator with Dakota Resource Council. Join us as we connect with local leaders and everyday heroes who are stepping up to protect our land, water, and way of life. In today's episode, we're catching up with Don Morrison, former Executive Director of Dakota Resource Council from 2012 to 2018. Don, thank you for being here today for the Dakota Resource Council podcast. I appreciate you just spending some time with us today.
Well, Sean, it's good to be here, and thanks for having me.
First of all, who is Don Morrison? In other words, a little bit about yourself, a little history, where you're from.
I'm a North Dakotan. I was born and raised in Minot. I taught high school in Ashley, and my wife and I have been living in Bismarck for a long time. I think one of the things I'm thinking about as where I'm from and what I'm doing is really North Dakota values of freedom, democracy, taking care of each other, community, and really knowing the importance of having our voices heard in what's happening in our communities.
And I always noticed that about you before Dakota Resource Council. So if you could talk a little bit how you became involved with Dakota Resource Council.
Well, my first involvement with DRC was in the late 1980s on issues that I was involved in several other groups that were advocating for on issues, and the issues crossed and were similar. So, and I was always impressed with how DRC was organizing members and getting people involved. And then in 2001, I participated in POCO, the Principles of Community Organizing. And I'll tell you, that was one of the very best learning experiences. I think POCO is just a wonderful training for people who have probably never been involved or who have and want to do good work. And then in 2012, I was hired as the executive director. I joined in 2001.
Yeah, so you've known Dakota Resource Council for a long time, and one of the best decisions you ever made was April of 2012 in hiring me. So thank you for that.
Well, that is one of the highlights.
Yeah, well, in my life, I just figured it'd be part of your highlights too.
It sure is.
So what were some other memorable moments or milestones that you had at DRC?
There were quite a few. And one that just pops into my head right away is we were working on the issues we were working on at that time. I think it was new rules on flaring, and the Industrial Commission was holding a hearing. The chair of our oil and gas task force was Theodora Birdbear from our Fort Berthold Power affiliate organization, as well as the chair of the task force. And she was sitting at a table by herself in front of the folks, and the picture we have is Theodora there by herself, and all these oil and gas executives and industry powerhouses, and they're not looking very happy.
No.
Because Theodora Birdbear was just so solid on information and how she presented the issues and how clear and concise and tough she was in making the case for DRC and DRC members. And we had impact on I think on that. And that's one of the great ones. And I'll talk more about that, I think.
Yeah, and
in how some of the impacts that we had.
And that's what I kind of want to lead into is the impacts. That was a major one, and Theodora was just a stellar member who it didn't matter, no matter what, she would go up and she would come prepared with her research and give facts and state it to the crowd, and she was a big one. But what were some other impacts that DRC have on communities? How does DRC help some of these smaller communities?
Well, one of the things I did want to bring up right away was that it wasn't during our time, but in the late 70s, DRC members and local and state government at the time worked together to pass a land reclamation law on strip mining of coal. And it was so good that it became a model for other states as well as the U.S. strip mining law. And that way, it just showed when the people's voice, when ordinary folks who live and work here have a voice in what's going on, good things can happen.
Well, and that can also go into, with the strip mining, Dakota Resource Council has definitely been shaping policy at the local, state, national levels. What role does DRC play in shaping that policy?
Well, one of the things that's really important with DRC is we do not come in with a prescribed idea of what there's folks living in a community. Let's say, like there's been several times where proposals have been made for confined animal feeding operations, which are known to pollute water and foul the air and destroy housing prices and farm and values of land. And so the industry is talking to people one at a time. And what DRC does is organize local groups and listen to people and get what where do people want to go? What are the problems? And then hone some ideas for how people's voices in the process of decision making. We live in a democracy, and we are to participate in that. And sometimes there are pretty tremendous roadblocks from ordinary folks to be able to have their voice heard. And DRC, and one of the things that I think is really important to remember, one person or one family fighting these big industries, and particularly industries who are then backed up by government, that's really hard, and it's really hard to win. So it's like we do this together, and we come up with some things that where people agree, and then helpful with information and accuracy, and members can do the research and find it, but we have staff that will help make sure things are accurate. And then the hearings happen, and the participation in the process happens, and our voices are heard.
Yeah, and it's a lot. It's more helpful when you're walking in one of those hearings with a group of community members instead of by yourself, advocating for an issue by yourself, when it's the whole community, and sometimes they just need a little help, and that's where DRC comes in and helps provide the research and kind of gives them direction on how to do this on the steps that some of these people don't even know what the steps are. So, right. And I agree with you. I think that's the impact that DRC has on some of these small communities.
I did want to mention another one that is also recent, was the Badlands Area Resource Council and the Davis Oil Refinery, because there's several things in that about how important it is that it's local people who farmed and ranched and lived near the proposed site for that refinery. And another thing that is really important is how important it is for local people to be involved. And it's the people who lived around the refinery who knew that it was going to impact their water, it's going to impact their roads, it's going to impact their ability to ranch and farm and live there. And so, and besides the fact that it was near the entrance of a national park at the same time, which an oil refinery isn't maybe what people
not the best
to a national park to see.
Yes.
So, but it's local, and we didn't have, we don't come in with a national kind of parachute thing. We don't even say people from Fargo should come in and let these people know what to do. It's they decided how to do this, and in the end, they have prevented that from. And it isn't that we don't need oil refineries per se with our members. Our members are all over the map on that. We wanted to make sure people who live there get to say what their communities looks like.
Yes, exactly. Well, and moving on from the Davis refinery, What's your opinion on some of the most pressing issues related to oil and gas concerning North Dakota? Because I know early on when you started as Executive Director of Dakota Resource Council, I mean, it was just, the Bakken was just starting. So everything, all the old laws and rules from the 80s were still taking place, but it didn't match up to what was going on there. So you've seen all that.
Right.
We were talking about setbacks again and just trying to update some of these laws and regulations. And now, today, what do you think are some of the more pressing issues now that the Bakken's kind of settled down a little bit?
Yeah, the Wild West of pretty much anything goes.
Yeah.
Is, as was in the past. It still has, I think there's still problems that need to be addressed or are being addressed, have to do with the cleanup of the oil spills and the cleanup of
saltwater spills
and radioactive waste and those kind of things. And it's really important for people who live there to have a voice in how those things are being the waste dumps are being developed and what rules and regs are making sure that they're safe. Also, the abandoned wells. The abandoned wells are a real problem. No. I think that need to be addressed. There wasn't the bonding that needed to be done. That may be something to address as well. But there's, I think a lot of it's the cleanup, and is the cleanup actually being done in a way that won't have all sorts of really bad impacts on the people who live there in the future?
Well, I know one of the concerns back then that we were talking about is the oil field graveyard. Like, I think it was in California, where all the rusted old oil wells still sitting there and causing damage. So, yeah, that is still a pressing issue and thinking about the future. Well, moving on from some of the oil and gas issues, what are some ways that folks can get involved with Dakota Resource Council and support the work that DRC does?
Oh, really good question. And I think it's really important if there are things that are happening in your community that do you think needs to be addressed in either a different way or with more folks involved in that process, contact DRC and let folks know that this is an issue. And there's other ways there's hearings that are happening. Check the DRC website or the Facebook page. Or one of the things I wanted to tell is a story.
Yeah.
Here.
Well, let's hear it.
And this was in. There were radioactive waste dump site was proposed in Dunn County. Mm-hmm. And the county commission had just in the summer before this happened had redone their ordinances. And lo and behold, not known to anybody, they had deleted this part of the law of their law that required 2/3 of the landowners around a hazardous waste site to agree to it within a mile's range.
Yeah.
And that was gone. And so when this dump site was proposed, all these farmers and ranchers thought they had this and then realized it wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
And started organizing and talking to each other. And our organizer at the time was Nicole Donaghy, mm-hmm. and she had talked to one of the ranchers that was upset about wanted to protect his land, and told him asked him if he was interested in working with the group, and he went, no, I don't think so. We're good. And then I think there was a hearing, or there was something else happened where he saw the work of how a bunch of people came out together to talk, and the information that Nicole is just a wonderful researcher.
She
does really
vouch for that.
And Kurt Karalichek told Nicole, okay, fine, let's do this. And 3 years later, Kurt was chairman of the board.
Yeah,
and is just a great leader. And you can, if you want, friendships and long time.
Well, and that's the part of the thing, the friendships, which is really cool to see when we have the summer meeting, when all of the groups from the different states come together, and some of these members, like how far back they go. When I saw Gene Wirtz and Pat Sweeney come together, and they haven't seen each other for a few years, and it was just like old times. They started talking about some of the fights from the 80s, and I mean, these friendships do last a long time. Well, they have to when you fight major issues like this to protect your farm, ranches, livelihoods. So, which is great. I'm glad he told the Kurt story because, he was good, just wanted to do it himself. Maybe he thought that we're some wacko group, which leads into what are some misconceptions that people have about Dakota Resource Council? Because my time working here, I've heard some crazy ones. That we're just a bunch of Californians infiltrating, North Dakota and acting as a North Dakota group. And as you can tell from my long vowels, I'm a Norwegian Southwestern North Dakotan. So what are some of the misconceptions do you think that people have about Dakota Resource Council?
Oh, yes, that is a really good question. And people do, our opponents, I think a lot of it comes from our opponents who pigeonhole us into something we're not. And one of those I know when I was there was environmentalists. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, I remember one of our longtime members, Donnie Nelson, he said, well, all I want to do is protect my farm, my land, my water, if that makes me an environmentalist, okay, I guess I am. Yeah. But it's like, people do not come to Dakota Resource Council because they want to be an environmentalist. That's just not the way it is. They come because huge, powerful industries are doing something, whether it's a waste of, sometimes it's like the city of Detroit or other big cities wanted to dump their waste. They want to have their garbage disposals in North Dakota, and communities said, no, we don't want that. And that does not make somebody an environmentalist. And our members come from all across the political spectrum. One of the things that I used to tell people was, if an oil company is going to do something that's going to hurt some rancher's pasture, or that's going to put a flare too close to people's houses and they're going to get sick, and these kind of things, they don't ask if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an environment. No, they do what they want to do. And then, so that means our members come to us because there's a reason that binds us together. Yeah. And it doesn't have much to do with politics or with being an environmentalist or not.
No, and I agree. And I remember that too. I mean, there's people with all kinds of political opinions, but at that time they didn't want their land to be a waste dump for the United States. Right. I mean, and I think anyone would, I don't want that in my backyard. Yeah. So, yeah, if that makes me environmentalist, then I'm with Donnie Nelson. Yeah. So why should people support Dakota Resource Council, and what kind of impact would their support have?
Okay, yes, I would certainly encourage people to support the Dakota Resource Council and get involved, and because it is a way, particularly in today's world, where I think people are feeling, is my voice ever heard? And is this, we have all this polarization, and we have a lot of, things for a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons, from a lot of different perspectives, are concerned about what's going on. And this is a way to work with people who care about where we live, and have an impact locally. And also, it actually, I would add at this time, DRC during the early parts of the oil boom was covered by national news organizations from all sorts of different ones, and in the local news as well. So it is a way of getting information when we're working together. we can have much more of an impact on things that matter to us and our communities.
Yeah, that's a way to have your voice heard.
Right.
I mean, it's hard to shout over all the big corporations and stuff trying to decide what to do with your land. It's much better to have community members together. So I totally agree with you. And Don, on that note, is there anything else that you want to add about DRC?
One of the things I was thinking of was, we talked about some of the leaders like Donnie Nelson and Gene Wirtz, and they joined DRC when they were in their 20s or 30s. And that is, it's when communities are developing and people are starting out with their families and their careers, that's a really good time to get involved with Dakota Resource Council, because you don't have time to do all that kind of thing on your own. You're really, really busy. And so getting involved together when you're younger is a really good time to get involved. And I just encourage people to join when they're younger, and wonderful things can happen.
Exactly, and I agree. I mean, life is busy in this. You don't get paid for advocating for your livelihood.
No.
And when you have kids, you're running all over, and you join a group on an issue that you care about. There's small things that you can do to be involved, but if you can't be at a hearing, someone else can. No. So
I like what you said. There's small things to get involved. Getting involved does not mean you have to be giving speeches or you have to be, traveling to a city someplace in Minot or Fargo or whatever. No, it's what you can do where you're at, and people are already maybe on Facebook complaining about something. Well, channel that in
exactly.
to something that actually is going to get to a public official and make a difference.
And we've had members that maybe they aren't too outspoken, but they will go to meetings and report back. And some people make phone calls, and some people may just know a legislator that they can talk to, and all that stuff. It's just like adding ingredients to a cake. So one little ingredient helps the whole thing.
Sure does.
Don, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming to the Dakota Resource Council podcast. Just your years of experience with DRC, both as a member and executive director. You got a lot of information up in that noggin, so I appreciate you sharing it and talking about DRC and how important it is to the community. So thank you for coming on.
All right, you bet, Sean. And thank you for talking with me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Dakota Resource Council podcast. To learn more, connect, or donate, visit drcinfo.org. I'm Sean Erickson. Until next time, keep the grassroots growing strong.